Okay, let's dive right into this. I want to kick things off with a couple of questions that, I'll admit, might sound a little unhinged, but they come straight from the source material we're breaking down, and they cut right to the core of a truly mind-bending idea.
So, first up, what if the very thing keeping you in your seat right now, the thing that holds entire galaxies together, what if it isn't a force at all? Yeah, just let that one sink in for a minute.
And for the second one, what if this cutting-edge technology that we're all talking about, artificial intelligence, isn't actually new? What if it's just an echo of something way, way older?
Now, here's the central claim from our source material. These two gigantic concepts, gravity and AI, are just different flavors of the exact same underlying pattern. It's like if you peel off the physics sticker and the computer science sticker, you find the very same skeleton underneath.
This big idea has a name: recursive reality. And at its heart, it's actually pretty simple. The theory is that reality isn't made of stuff, particles and objects. Instead, it's made of informational rules that just repeat over and over at every single scale you can imagine. The fancy term for this, if you're curious, is general structural isomorphism.
And that leads to this great phrase from the sources. Now, this isn't just a joke here. It's a way of saying there's no fundamental top or bottom floor to reality. It's just nested layers of the same logic repeating forever. The pattern that organizes an entire galaxy is somehow the same one that organizes a single thought in your head. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with the physics. We need to kind of shift our thinking away from a universe full of hard objects and toward a universe that acts more like a giant data processing system.
And look, this is not some fringe idea. This comes from one of the titans of modern physics, John Archibald Wheeler. His famous phrase, "it from bit," basically means that every single thing in the universe, every particle, every force, every it, actually springs from a simple bit of information, a choice, a simple yes or no.
The real smoking gun for this idea of an informational universe is something called the holographic principle. And let me tell you, it's one of the weirdest and most mind-blowing ideas in all of physics.
This is where our everyday intuition just completely breaks down. Think about it. The number of books you can cram into a library depends on its volume, right? The space inside. But for a black hole, all the information it can possibly hold depends only on its surface area. It's as if everything is written on its skin, not stored inside. Which leads to the wild suggestion that our 3D reality could just be a projection, a hologram cast from a 2D surface.
All right, so let's follow this train of thought. If the universe is fundamentally data, then what in the world is gravity? Well, the source material argues it's not a pole, it's a process of organizing information. And when we talk about systems that organize information into complex, stable structures, we're often talking about some form of intelligence.
This parallel is just brilliant. Think about what your brain does. It's a kind of constraint management system. It takes all this chaotic sensory noise from the world and organizes it into a coherent picture. Well, gravity does the exact same thing to the cosmos. It takes chaotic clouds of dust and gas and organizes them into stars and galaxies. It's like the universe's own way of zip-filing itself into stable, beautiful, complex structures.
Okay, but you might be thinking, this sounds really cool and poetic, but how do we know it's not just a nice metaphor? Well, the source material actually proposes a specific tool for this, a way to rigorously check if these connections are for real. It's called a structural isomorphism engine. Now, don't let the name scare you. It's not a physical machine. It's a way of thinking, a kind of logical filter you can use to compare any two systems. And the absolute key rule is that it operates on structure, not on meaning. It totally ignores the labels, what things are called, and looks only at the shape of the relationships between them. So, let's use a classic example to make this super clear. On the surface, what does a London Underground have in common with a corporate hierarchy? Nothing, right? One's about trains and tunnels, the other is about managers and meetings.
But when you strip away all the nouns and just look at the pure structure, the shape of it is identical. You've got nodes, stations, or departments. You've got connections, tracks or reporting lines. You've got bottlenecks, a central station or a CEO. And you've got flow, passengers or information. The engine says if the shape matches, they are the same system, just running on different hardware. The underlying operating system is exactly the same.
All right, so let's take this powerful engine
and apply it to the biggest topic on the planet right now, artificial intelligence. The argument from the source is that what we think is brand new is actually a silicon echo of a much, much older architecture.
So the source material uses this kind of universal grammar to describe these systems. It's got three parts: the source, which is just raw potential, the field, which is the data it works with, and the logos, which are the rules that give it all shape. So let's map a large language model onto this. You've got the hardware and electricity, that's the source. You've got its training data, the whole internet, that's the field. And you have the algorithms and loss functions that shape that data, and that is the logos. See? It fits perfectly.
But what about when things go wrong? When an AI starts hallucinating or gets trapped in some kind of bias loop? This is where a concept called the false center comes into play. It's basically a part of a system that gets confused and mistakes its own very specific local goal for the goal of the entire system. The source material has this perfect and kind of hilarious description for it. A false center is like a middle manager who's completely obsessed with hitting their own little performance metric, even if it drives the entire company into the ground. They are optimizing for their little piece of the puzzle while accidentally destroying the whole picture. For AI, this is literally the alignment problem. Now, this pattern doesn't just show up in our tech and in physics. If this theory really holds water, we should be able to find it in our oldest stories, too. The source argues that ancient myths aren't really history, they're more like data visualizations. They're systems diagrams disguised as epic tales.
Just look at the story of Genesis. We usually think of it as a story about being punished. But if you look at it through this structural lens, it's a perfect blueprint for how consciousness emerges. You have the garden, that's the initial, pristine, undifferentiated state. You have the fruit, which introduces a new variable, self-awareness. And the exile, it's not a punishment, it's a structural necessity. To become an individual, you have to create a boundary between me and everything else.
So here's the really crucial point. This way of seeing things completely reframes some of our oldest debates. I mean, we've spent centuries arguing about science versus metaphysics, right? But what if they were never actually fighting in the first place?
What if they're just different languages, all trying to describe the same underlying operating system? Physics is describing the hardware. Psychology is describing the user experience. And metaphysics, it's describing the deep architecture of the OS itself. They're not in conflict. They're just parallel ways of encoding the same truth.
And this brings us to one last really profound connection. Think about gravity. It binds things together into beautiful, complex systems without crushing them. The source argues that love structurally does the same thing. It's a binding force that creates relationship without possession. So according to this theory, love, gravity, and intelligence aren't just poetic ideas that sound similar. They share the exact same deep architecture. They are the fundamental forces that allow complexity and us to even exist.
And so we're left with this final, provocative question from the source material. If your brain, the internet, a galaxy, and our oldest stories are all running on the same basic operating system, what happens when you finally learn how to read the code? Because once you can do that, you might just stop being a character in the story and start understanding how to navigate the system itself.